Right, so hello everyone. As I said, we are talking today about our Isle of Wight ring-fenced funds that we've got for 2024. I'm Joanne, I'm the Grants Manager, and we've got Catherine, who's our Grants Administrator, on the call as well, who will be able to answer questions at the end. So what we're aiming to cover for this session, we're going to have a look at two of our open funds that we've got at the moment. We've got one called Young Island Lives, and we've got one which is called the Isle of Wight Community Fund. So just a quick checklist. Are you looking for the right funding? Both of these funds are ring-fenced for non-profit community organisations. You need to have a core organisational focus on the Isle of Wight and deliver work to Isle of Wight residents. So that's just a very top line overview of the funds. In case you don't know who we are the Hampshire Isle of Wight Community Foundation. We are one of the UK's 47 community foundations. The key things that you need to know about us as a funder are that we're a place-based funder, which means we fund in Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. We run a range of grant programmes with different donors, which are open throughout the year. So you can always go onto our website, click our subscribe button and be alerted to what we've got coming up. Our focus is on supporting grassroots community organisations, and by grassroots, we do generally mean those with a smaller income. We'll come on to that later because there are a few caveats and exemptions on the Young Island Lives Fund. Our core aim is to tackle poverty and inequality. And to give an idea of scale of our grant making, in 2023, we made grants totaling just under 1.5 million. We are a very small team. There's 6 of us in the whole organisation and most of us are part-time. The people that you will deal with most if you're making a grant from us are myself, the Grants Manager, Catherine, who's our Grants Administrator, or Jackie, who's our Chief Executive. So it's always useful to kind of look at the logistics of how to apply. So both of the current Isle of Wight funds share the same important dates that will be good for you to note down. So both of those funds are open at the moment. So they opened on the 16th of April. And both of those funds close on the 22nd of May. All of our open programmes close at midnight on the advertised date. Once that closing date has passed, we will obviously read through the applications that have come in. So we will have an assessment period, which will be kind of June, early July. All of our open programmes will go to a funding panel, which will make the final decisions. That Isle of Wight panel is scheduled for the 15th of July. So that will include some of our trustees who are Isle of Wight residents, and people from the Isle of Wight community sector will also sit on that panel. The projects that are awarded funding at that point will be, sorry, I seem to have skipped a few slides. The projects which are funded at that point will be able to go live really from the 1st of August 2024. So we aim to make payments as soon as possible after that panel date. The Isle of Wight Community Fund, 12-month grants, so they would run from August 24 to July 25. The Young Island Lives funding is for 2 years, so that would have an additional calendar year, which would run from August 25 to July 26. So let's start with the Young Island Lives, which is the first fund. This fund has an anonymous donor, which we worked with them back in 2023, and they are very excited to work with us again in 2024. If you saw the fund in 2023, it was young people focused, but had a slightly different thematic focus in 2023. So if you applied in 23 or had a grant in 23, then do make sure that you read the 24 criteria because it will be slightly different. The aim of the programme this year is to fund young people, and we're defining that as 11 to 25-year-olds. And it's to fund them around employability and skills initiative. And this is purely an Isle of Wight fund. So those must be Isle of Wight residents and the work must be on the Isle of Wight. So the grants for this particular programme are up to £10,000 per year for a 2-year funding. So that means you can have up to a maximum of £20,000 for work, which is running over 24 months. You can apply for less than that. So you could apply for £6,000. a year, so have a £12,000 grant. It's obviously up to you to think about what's needed for your project, what's deliverable for you. If you've got questions about that, give us a ring, but those are kind of the top line guidelines for that. As we've said, this is Isle of Wight geography, and the impact theme that these projects should be working around are employability and skills. All of our open programs have what we call program criteria. This is criteria which is specific to that particular funding program. So as I said, we have a number open on the website at the moment. So this program criteria is just for Young Ireland Lives. We use this to help us decide which projects will progress to assessment and will go through a panel. So please do make sure that you meet both of these elements of program criteria that I'm going to talk through. So the first key element is fairly self-explanatory, that you should be working with young people, but there's an additional layer around that. We want you to tell us about the barriers that those young people face. So this could include a vast array of barriers. It could be that young people are living in poverty, because this is employability and skills work. It could be that they've struggled with mainstream education. It could be that they're from minoritized groups. They could already be neat and be excluded from school or at risk of being excluded. This is not an exhaustive list of examples. So if you feel that you're working with young people with barriers and you're not listed there, don't see that as an exclusion. You can always phone Catherine and I and have a chat through the groups of young people that you're working with, but do make sure within your application that you're telling us who your target group is and why you think that they do face barriers. The second programme criteria is that within the overall theme of employability and skills, we're looking for what we're calling a sustained programme of learning. So that means that we're not wanting to fund, for example, one-off trips or experiences. We're not wanting to fund very short periods of workshops. So you might say young people come for 3 weeks for workshops and get a certificate at the end of it. What we're looking for is more sustained, ongoing work. So these are 2-year grants, so we're not necessarily expecting you to have the same people on day 1 and at the end of 2 years, but we are looking for you to do something which is longer term. And the reason this is important to the funder is because they understand that young people who have those barriers, might need a longer intervention. They might face setbacks. They might not always make linear progress on a programme. They might have a range of barriers and support needs which need to be kind of addressed in conjunction with their learning. So always make sure when you're thinking about your intervention that, you're looking at something which is sustained. Again, if you want to run past us the examples of, what you were thinking of delivering, Catherine and I would absolutely be happy to give you some feedback on whether we think that fits the brief. So the additional points for Young Ireland Lives, you can apply for new or existing activities or services. So we're not necessarily looking for you to reinvent the wheel. This can be something you've been delivering for a number of years. It could already be a successful core programme that you're delivering. Equally, we would fund new things. So if you want to do something new, obviously tell us why you think there's a need for that. Or if you want to expand an existing service, again, explain why you think that there could be a need for expansion. We are keen that, sorry, I'm just letting some people into the waiting room. We are keen that these applications show how they've involved young people. We know that consultation with young people can sometimes be tricky, and that you obviously aren't necessarily going to have young people in your governance of your organisation, but it's really useful for you to show us how young people have kind of shaped that work. So it could be that you've run some events to get their views. It could be that you do have kind of youth leadership. You could have young people kind of volunteering and helping out. You can do all sorts of fun, engaging ways of getting young people's voices involved in the decision making, so that you absolutely know that the projects that you're delivering will be fun and engaging for young people to be part of. Another kind of key additional point that we want to stress with this fund is that obviously the 11 to 25-year-old age band that the fund covers does potentially include school-aged children. This fund is not for work with children within school hours, and that will only be funded if the target audience is NEET, excluded, at risk of exclusion, or homeschooled. So predominantly, we're not able to fund stuff which is seen as kind of a statutory obligation. We can fund additional to that. Again, if you do feel that your work is happening with school hours, or you're not kind of sure whether your work fits, do give us a ring. But the general principle is it should be out of school hours unless you're part of one of those key groups listed on the slide. This is a popular programme and we're often oversubscribed, so do make sure that you reflect those kind of programme elements within your criteria. We've put an illustrated case study on the website, so do have a read of that. And as I said, you know, do use Catherine and I as a sounding board. We're really happy, especially when they are bigger multi-year grants, for you to come to us with your project idea and chat through. It's not filling in an application form with us is not meant to be a exam. Under test conditions, you know, you can absolutely share your ideas, ask questions, and hopefully we can help you prepare the strongest application. So we're now going to go on to the second programme, which is running on the island. A key point to note at this point is that we are allowing you to apply to both funds. So again, if you were looking at this funding last year, we initially suggested that you had to pick which of these funds to apply to. This year, we've got trustee approval that you can apply to both of these funds. So that means you can make an application to Young Ireland Lives and make an application to the Isle of Wight Community Fund. We obviously suggest that you submit different proposals for different work for each of those, and don't just duplicate your bid. Maybe if you're an organisation working with young people and adults, you could split it that way and think about targeting your young person's work to Young Ireland Lives and your adult work to the Community Fund. Or if you're a youth organisation, you could still put in two pieces of work, but make sure they're different. So what are the Isle of Wight Community Funds 2024? So this funding is part of our Isle of Wight Endowment Funds. So it's an annual programme that we run. And some of you will be familiar with this because it's quite similar to the Isle of Wight Community Funds that we ran last year. So the aim of this programme is to fund community projects on the Isle of Wight, which have that kind of interlinked aim of tackling poverty and increasing health and well-being. So we're really interested in finding out, that intersection of, reaching people potentially impacted by poverty and helping increase their health and well-being. This can work with island residents of all ages. So unlike the previous fund, you can work with adults, older people, younger children on this one. This is also for one-to-one and group work stuff. So it could include things like counselling, or it could include group work such as youth clubs, support groups, etc. And we're going to go on to look in a little bit more detail about the programme criteria for this. So these are slightly smaller grants. They're just 1 year funding for these, and they're between 1,000 and 5,000. Again, this is just for Isle of Wight community organisations. And the impact theme for this is around health and wellbeing. So again, I talked earlier about programme criteria. So as a reminder, programme criteria is criteria which is specific to this particular fund you're applying for. And for the Isle of Wight Community Fund, we are looking for you to show in your application that your work is reaching people leading hard and challenging lives, and that your work will reach people who are living in poverty, facing discrimination, or who are isolated. So again, it's up to you to show in your application who that target group is and what the needs of that target group are. So it could be families struggling to cover living costs. It could be people who are facing mental health problems. It could include people living with a disability. As we said, this fund has got a health and wellbeing focus. So people living with long-term health conditions or struggling with their health, such as mental health, would be a really good way of kind of showing that you're working with a key target group and meeting those fund outcomes. So the second programme criteria, again, the same with Young Ireland Lives, we are interested to make sure in your application that the work is kind of informed by the local community. So again, you don't necessarily have to have done a very formal consultation. It could be that you've done feedback boxes. It could be that you've done like an online poll. It could be that you've got a little working group. It could be that you've got support staff who have lots of anecdotal conversations with local people about what they need. It could be that you're running an existing service and people have got waiting lists or can't always access that service, and that has been fed back to you. So it's really useful for you to tell us what those factors are that have helped shape this work and how local people have been involved in that. The third element of programme criteria for this is, again, thematic. So it's around how your work will ease the effects of poverty and or increase health and well-being. So we're very philosophical that these are small one-year grants, and we're not expecting you to lift people out of poverty or revolutionise people's health and well-being necessarily on a small grant, but we want you to show how you're taking steps to alleviate some of those challenges and barriers that they face. So that could be linking people with advice and benefits. It could be helping to reduce their anxiety. It could be helping people feel more connective in their local community by maybe being part of a local group or local network. So again, always think in your bid to show us those positive steps that will hopefully be accomplished by the grant funding. So these are some additional points about the Isle of Wight Community Funds. You can apply for new or existing activities. So again, we're not expecting you to reinvent the wheel. This could be an ongoing youth club or an ongoing support service. It could be an older person's lunch club, which has been running for a number of years, really successful. That's not a barrier to you applying. Or equally, as the same with Young Ireland Lives, this could be a new service or an expansion of an existing service. For this particular fund, you will need to have an income of under 1 million and be an Isle of Wight-based community organisation. We have some flex on Young Ireland Lives for you to have an income over 1 million, so that's a key variant between these two funds. Most of our open funds have an income cap of 1 million, so the Isle of Wight Community Fund does come under that. Because this is work which is tackling health and wellbeing and poverty, we get lots of inquiries about whether we will fund food banks and pantries under this fund. Our trustees have made a decision that we will fund them, but we will fund them for that kind of wider holistic advice, such as an advice worker to work within that food bank or pantry. So this fund will not cover food supplies, so you can't top up your supplies for food banks or pantries within this fund. We do periodically throughout the year sometimes have other pots of funding that cover that, which is one of the reasons we've excluded it from this particular fund. So there are lots of ways that you can keep in touch with us to find out more about our funding. So as I said, we have a range of open funds that run throughout the year. These will all be on our website. We have a green subscribe button on our website where you can click to receive grants newsletter updates. Some of those funds, like the Isle of Wight ones, are geography specific. Some of them are thematically specific, so they might just be for, say, young people or older people. So always make sure you read that programme criteria. We've got a big fund coming up in August called Including Communities that some of you might be familiar with. So that's our kind of flagship programme that covers the Isle of Wight, all of Hampshire as well. And that is a really lovely fund because it's 1 year grants of up to 10,000, which cover a range of community activities. So keep your eye open for that one. But yeah, at the moment, have a look at the Isle of Wight ones. All of our content about grants goes on social media, so do think about following us on LinkedIn, Facebook or X. One of the key things that we always advise people if they're maybe new to applying for us or uncertain about their project is just to get in touch with us. So I've popped our grants admin email on there and our direct contact line. So yeah, give Catherine and I a bell or drop us an email and we'll always be happy to chat through your application with us. I hope that's been useful. Thank you. I'm just going to stop.